The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. It's Rebecca Sendel here. Thanks for joining today to talk about Curate. We're on a webinar platform versus a GoToMeeting platform. So if we definitely want to take questions, and we'll take questions, so we will be unmuting everybody. So please do ask questions, but also mute yourself if you are not talking, just to make sure that we keep it clear for everybody to hear. Okay, so it looks like we've got a number of people online, and we are also recording this session. So if you want to refer back to it, or if you want to share it with anybody else on your team, you'll be able to do that as well. Okay. There's also just a usual chat box, like in the question box. You can type something in also if you don't want to interrupt. I've also got Tanya on the line, who supports all the teams. I think everybody's met Tanya at this point. So she will be able to help you with anything, administrative around Curate FX. She'll be able to point you in the right direction. So Tanya, do you want to go ahead and unmute everybody now, just so that we can have this?
I don't think that function is working. I can try to, I'm going to unmute everyone individually, so it might just take a few minutes.
Okay.
2 or 3, everyone should be on the way.
Okay. All right. So Tanya's in the process of unmuting everybody. Like I said, just jump in if you've got any questions. In the meantime, let me get started with the presentation. Okay. So Curate FX. I think many of you have heard of it, seen it, etc. at Action Week and other places, but we really want to help you get started with using it for your Catalyst project. And okay, so Catalyst projects and real company transformations in general are falling into this model where some of them are digitizing existing services, and some of them in the top half of this matrix are creating new services that are ecosystem or digital type of services. So, so the good news is that no matter where your Catalyst project fits on this type of a model, whether it's moving out here into digital service provider land, or whether it's becoming a digital service enabler, or actually new type of digital services, you can use Curate FX for any of these type of projects. Okay, so it really applies to everything, and I'll show you some examples when we get a little further into looking at Curate FX. So for anybody that's brand new, Curate FX is based on a lot of existing TM Forum assets. So a lot of things should look familiar. It's based on a lot of work that's done by the IOE team around B2B2X and around partnering. It's got frameworks in it. It's got APIs in it. It's got digital service reference architecture in it. So it's got a lot of things that should look familiar to you. And what we've done is put together into a tool a lot of the things that we have already in TM Forum, so that you can define, design, and scope your projects, particularly by looking at all of the stakeholders that are involved in a project, and systematically go through a business level definition, design, and then a scoping of the project, all done in TM Forum language. And the whole thing is collaborative, so it works really well for Catalyst projects, because it lets your team work together on capturing what it is you're working through on your Catalyst project. So I will come back to this slide at the end, but I wanted to just show you this kind of a timeline of an order of how you want to do things, how I recommend you do things on your Catalyst project before we go into Curate FX. So now up front is when you should be figuring out your business model and your business drivers, and really anything to do with kind of the why of your Catalyst project. So a lot of times in Catalyst projects, right, we jump into the technical solution because there's a lot of, a lot of technical perspective that comes to the table on most Catalyst projects. But we would like all the Catalyst projects to slow down for a minute in the beginning and capture the business perspective. And we give you tools in CurateFX to do that. I'll walk through it in a minute, but really thinking about what are the business drivers for the project? What are the problem statements? What problem are you trying to solve? Who do you need to have at the table to solve that problem? And what are the value propositions for everybody that would be at the table? So really capture this business view and then say, okay, now that we know what it is that we want to do and why we want to do it, what would be the user stories and the business models that could make that come to life? So, we've definitely had experience from other projects that have used CurateFX in the past where they have said, okay, we thought we knew what we wanted to do on our project until we actually sat down and went through this process in CurateFX, and then we had so many new ideas of what it was that we wanted to do. So this upfront part is really important. The middle part is really, working on your business level use cases and then working out the model of how all of your stakeholders fit together. And that will, if you haven't seen CurateFX, that will mean a lot more when we look at CurateFX. But again, this is part of deciding, what is it that we're actually trying to solve? And then finally, as you do your development, your technical part, CurateFX can help you capture the details. So it can help you look at, what processes, which frameworks things are relevant to this project. It's a really great way to capture what you've done on the project. So, I did just one little story. There's a team who they exhibited their Catalyst in Singapore in December. And they told me that they spent more time working on defining this upfront stuff than they actually spent developing the demo, because by the time they had developed this upfront piece of what they wanted to do and what the business model was, they knew exactly what had to be in the demo. So there was no guessing in putting the demo together. And so it turned out to be a very efficient way for them to do their project. So please bear that in mind. And I will come back to this at the end. We'll look at it again when you, when you have more of a perspective on CurateFX. Okay, so I am going to now jump into CurateFX itself. Okay, so when you go into CurateFX, you're going to have, if you've never logged in before and you've never done a project, you won't have any little tiles on here except for a couple of examples, okay? And you've just got your favorite projects. You've got your projects that are your own projects. I have a lot of those because I've done this for a while now. Shared projects that other people shared with you, and all projects, right? I tend to use this favorite projects window. You can just favorite a project from this little menu here. So I've got in here all my catalysts and all my demos, projects that I can use to help explain the way CurateFX works to people. So I am going to show you a demo project because I know what's in here, and it's easy for me to show you how CurateFX works. But then I'm going to go back and show you some of these Catalyst examples that Catalysts have done in the past. Okay. So this is a demo about smart parking, right? Basically helping people find a parking place in a city faster through technology. And so I'll go through this quickly, and then what I will also do, and I forgot to mention this, is I'll show you a blank project, a brand new one, so you'll know how to get started. Okay, so I'm kind of showing you the end before the beginning, but I will show you this, and then we'll go back and look at a blank one on how you get started. Okay, and it's very easy. So, all right. So as I was saying, right, the upfront piece is to define the business view. So there's a number of modules in CurateFX that help you do that, okay? Up front, you've got stakeholders and roles of stakeholders. Depends how you're thinking about this on your project. The roles is sort of a grouping of stakeholders that are doing the same thing, right? So in a smart parking world, you're going to have companies or stakeholders that provide parking service. You're going to have users of parking. You're going to have technology providers. You're going to have maybe some external partners that are delivering services. You're going to have some city departments. So those are the roles. And then you'll have a number of quite granular stakeholders, right? Maybe different companies that are providing parking service, maybe public and private. You'll have different kinds of users, residents, visitors, maybe fleets that are using the parking. You'll have a parking management system provider to provide the technology piece. You'll have maybe the transportation department, the finance department, the IT department, different departments in the city for whom this is an important project, etc. So you've got your roles and your stakeholders. That's kind of how you baseline what you're doing in CurateFX. This is kind of the language of CurateFX. Your stakeholders will pop up all over the project now once you do this. And it's just a module where you're filling in blanks. So you've got blank fields here and you're typing in the role and the stakeholders are in a drop down, which I guess I should have shown you this first. You fill in the stakeholders and then they show up in the drop down and then you can add their roles later. But again, it's a you type it in, right? And you've got a choice of roles. So you kind of go back and forth between the stakeholder and the roles modules to fill this in. And then you're at your kind of your baseline position for CurateFX. Okay, so once you do that, right, what I'm going to show you now, see, I showed you these two modules that you fill in the stakeholders and the roles. I'm going to go back in here and then I'm going to use arrows to navigate across to these other modules. Navigation wise, you can always come back out to this main dashboard view, but you can also navigate in order through the different modules. See the arrow here, it tells you which module is coming next. So I was in the stakeholder role view. Now I'm going to go to the business driver view, right? So this is high-level business drivers. Again, it's a little template that you're filling in. Your stakeholders show up on a drop-down, and it is literally just typing in, why are we doing smart parking? Well, there's a lot of traffic in the city. There's pollution. Maybe there's a high cost of operating parking facilities, and so you want to help those companies stay in business. What are the business drivers? For a lot of the Catalyst projects, right, it's going to be about introducing new services faster, improving customer experience, things like that are the high-level business driver for the project. Okay, maybe it's about automation, right? We have quite a few projects around, getting networks configured automatically to support new services, etc. So that's the top level business drivers. Then you'll go into value propositions. This is about how are the parties who are participating in this project going to make money, basically, right? Will they be making money, new revenue, or will they be saving money? So in any kind of a project or any kind of an ecosystem with stakeholders, if everyone's not making money, they're not going to stay in the ecosystem. So you need to think about where is the value coming from for all of the parties that are in the ecosystem. So, excuse me. So in this, this is about save time and or money when searching for a parking spot. Who would do that? Well, that would pretty much be the users. There's maybe a city livability. Maybe there's increasing revenue per parking spot. So that's everybody that owns the parking places. They would be making more money by increasing revenue per parking spot. So this is really thinking about, how's value going to be generated for everybody in the ecosystem so that they will stay in the as part of the team. The next one is user stories. Fairly, this is a business level view from a user story perspective. I know in TM Forum we have several user story types of templates that can go into lots more detail, but this is definitely still at the business level. But again, it's making you say, how will each stakeholder in this project, what will they bring, what do they get out of it, and what do they bring to the table? And then it also asks you, I know I'm successful when, so that you can put down some kind of a measure of success. Okay, this is important to think about how you want to measure success for each of the parties that are involved. Okay, so I've got, again, it's a template, right? I've got a bunch of them filled in here, but a blank one just looks like that. And these can be very long. I'll show you some examples from some catalysts where people have written lots of things into various templates in Curate FX. Okay, so, and then we've got one more business view, which is the business canvas. Particularly for services or for catalysts where you're thinking about delivery of a new kind of a service. This is really important to think about the business model, because this does make you look at, you know, the cost and revenue side of things. It makes you look at where the money's coming from. You know, what are the channels to market? What are the key activities that you have to do to get to market? So there's a very nice implementation here. This is actually an Osterwalder business canvas, which is not something TM Forum invented, but it's a very nice, easy to use implementation of it. And this is something that I've had some catalysts say they spend a lot of time on because they really want to figure out what is the business model. And so just to show you quickly, any of these you click on is basically another little template that you fill in. So, you know, you've got your name and your description, and then it's giving you ideas, and then you'll save it as a new item, right? I don't need to save these, obviously. I'm going to delete the blank ones. But any of these little plus signs, they get you going, right? And they give you things to fill in. So you're not just figuring this out on your own. And then we've got color coding in here. So if you wanted to put multiple perspectives in, multiple perspective, my screen is freaking out. Thank you, GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar. You can turn off on or off perspectives just, you know, by applying color coding. And you can turn on and off perspectives very easily. You just add the colors through this little color, you know, paint drop thing. So that's the business view, right? That's what I was saying. We want you to do this up front, right? Do it now. Think about why is everyone at the table, okay? And that kind of takes you through this first two areas, what I'm saying to do now, okay? Then as you're jumping in, we move over to looking at really designing what the ecosystem looks like, okay? In this smart parking, there's a lot of external parties involved, right? If your project is more of an internal one, you're still gonna need to have relationships between all the parties, okay? So like I said, I'll show you this one, which is one that is very external ecosystem oriented, but then I'll show you some catalysts that are definitely more, you know, the internal digital transformation type of a project, okay? So, and actually, before I do this, I should pause and see, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, no, just a remark.
Yes, hi, Sophie.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you doing? Yes, it's
yes.
If you can please mention that Osterwalder Canvas has been used for the first time at TM Forum in order to define the use cases in data analytics area.
Yep. So Sophie's right. This Osterwalder Canvas we've been using for a long time in different ways and places, and one of the places, if you want to refer to it, is a set of data analytics use cases that we've already got captured, and many of them already have Osterwalder business canvases. So there's a lot of good history in using that Osterwalder Canvas in TM Forum. Yep. Thanks for that, Sophie. I see a question in writing here. Oh, is that okay? That was the same question. Okay, perfect. Does anybody else have any questions or comments before I go on? Because I get on a roll, right? I definitely get on a roll. Okay, so I will keep going. Okay, so I'm going into the ecosystem designer now. Before I do anything, I'm going to show you how this view starts. I'm going to show you a blank one. Ecosystem designer. I'll just call it new demo for now. Okay, so when you go into ecosystem designer, you've got a blank screen, a blank canvas essentially, and all of your stakeholders are listed over here, okay, in this window. And from there, you can start to create your ecosystem. It is as simple as dragging your stakeholders out of this panel and into the blank space here, okay? So, you know, I tend to put the producers of a service over here, right? The suppliers of a service over here. I tend to put the users on the other side. This is just the way I think about it. You can do this any way you want in your project, but this is the way I think about it. And then I tend to put the kind of the platform maybe in the middle, right? You're going to operate the parking management system. You're going to have a parking management system. So I like to put these in the middle. And then I put kind of the owners or the orchestrators of the ecosystem at the top. So maybe that's the city transportation department. So you bring your stakeholders onto the picture and then you literally connect them up just by drawing lines, and then CurateFX gives you some things to fill in, okay? So, and there's different categories of relationships across the top. Okay, so that's kind of the background, right? Now I'm going to show you what I've put together, and then maybe we'll come back to this and I can show you how I got to the views that I'm going to show you. Okay, so it's very simple to do the drawing. The bigger part is the discussion about, you know, what are the relationships. Okay, so in this one, right, this is similar to what I just showed you. I put the providers of parking service over here. I put the users of parking service over here. I put the platform for operating the parking management system in the middle, and I put the orchestrator or the kind of the owner of the ecosystem at the top. And all I did on any of these, right, they're different shapes and colors. It just, a window pops up, you get a list of shapes and a list of colors. That's where my shapes and colors came from. Okay, so, and if you want something to be the same color, like I'm not too happy with this purple color, I want it to be this blue color, I can just copy it from here and paste it over here. And now you've got those two things the same color. Okay, I have drawn in here, you see the different colors. Blue is for contractual relationships. This orange is for data, you know, relationships about who owns the data and where will the data come from. It's not a technical view of data, it's a kind of a business view of data. Financial, you know, how's the money flowing between the parties. Operational, who's doing what operationally, and then product and service. On this view, I've just got really the contractual and financial in the data view, so that I wanted to look at this quite simply to see where are we going to need contracts, who's going to pay for what, right? So I've created a really simple view here of just a couple of these parking lot owners, a couple of the users, just to get my thinking going, okay? So that's a really simple way to start. Just start with a high level view of how do we think this is going to work and how do we think this is going to flow together. But with CurateFX, you can also make it a little fancier, right? I've put a background in here so that you can see which categories companies fit into. And you literally do that. I shouldn't say that. I didn't put a background in here. I put an image element. And you literally just bring an image element into CurateFX. You choose a file. Oh, you can look at my expense reports. That's what pictures come up. I've got a picture file, right? And then I've got my any picture that I want to use in my picture file that I can pull into CurateFX. So that's how I did that, right? I just created the picture that I wanted and I pulled it in, and it just gives you context, right? Where I've got suppliers, platform users, and orchestrators. Same thing we were looking at on the last one, and you can do the very same thing of turning on and off, right? We can look at just the data view or the financial view, etc. But this is just really important to make sure you understand what's happening in your ecosystem. Okay, then I did a much more complex one, right? I said, okay, I'm going to bring all my stakeholders in, right? You see, there's no more stakeholders over here on this left side. I've brought them all in. I've looked at all of, you know, quite a few of the different relationships, although not all of them yet, because that really gets too complicated. But once again, you can turn things on and off. You can say, I only want to look at the business view, or I only want to look at the data view. And then I used my same background to say, you know, how do I add some context to this? Okay, so now I've got all of my parties categorized, etc. And you can do a lot of different kinds of backgrounds. This is a really simple one. But you know, if you're doing a project that is, maybe there's some internal stuff happening and some external stuff happening, maybe you just want to split your view into two, internal and external. Maybe you want to split it into, you know, if it's more of an internal project, maybe you've got, you know, marketing and technical and IT or something, marketing, network, and IT, that you want to split it into, and just give some visualization to who all your stakeholders are in the ecosystem. And you can do that with these images, right? Just bring in an image, drop it in, it becomes a background, right? Because you can move it to the back. And then I did, you know, just a couple of little cute things, because you can add images as well, right? So let's say you wanted to have a picture of trucks for a fleet, or a picture of a smart meter, instead of just a box that says smart meter. You can do that as well. So you can get creative just using this image element box here, literally by dragging it in. You can also do a text element box if you want to just, you know, have something where you're typing some text. And then you've got a text element box that you've added into your ecosystem, okay? So if you want to just be, you know, labeling something, essentially, you can do that as well. Okay, and then you've got little control things here. You know, do you want to make it bigger? Do you want to change the color? Do you want to rotate it, etc.? I'm just going to trash this because we don't really need it. But, you know, and then I did add some text down here. I actually think I just actually added that. Yeah, so I've added that little element there to add a bit of an explanation. So you can get creative with this designer, or not. You can just do very simple, you know, just boxes and lines. I've created a few really specific views here, a financial view, where I looked in more detail about who was going to pay for things, right? Who's getting paid and who's paying for things. I've got a data view, because the data is super critical in most projects these days. So who's got the data? Where's it coming from? Does everybody have permission to share the data, etc.? So that's the ecosystem designer. Okay, that I have sort of as a middle piece of your project, right? Thinking about how all the pieces fit together. And that's where you say, okay, if we've looked at this business view and we've looked at this kind of relationship view, then you really know what your project is about, right? Everybody on the team has a really clear view of what your project is about. And you know, like I said, you can do all of this collaboratively. So everybody's going to be, you know, putting their information into the same place. And also, I didn't show you this, but there's ways to comment on all of this. So any of this you go into, you can always add a comment. Okay, you click on the comment window, type in a comment, right? And so as a team, you can be, you know, need to add new stakeholders or whatever, right? So you can add information, and it's sort of like a chat window that happens on the side here. So as a team, you can be, you know, saying, hey, you know, service provider champions, we need you to review this and see if it's the right stakeholders or whatever, right? So everything's got comments here. Another thing I did not show you is that many places in Curate FX, you'll see a little link icon, and you can always link to something like a Confluence page, where you've maybe got a lot of information, you know, some you know, diagrams or whatever that you want to be able to refer to, but you don't necessarily need in Curate FX. But like in the ecosystem designer, if you did have some kind of a diagram you wanted to pull in, you could always also pull it in as an image element. So we've got choices where you can link to things, or you can pull them in on the ecosystem designer as well. Okay, so that's kind of the middle piece, right? Which is really the design piece of, of your, I went out by accident. So I'll go back into this project we were looking at. And the last piece is how you can use frameworks. So probably a lot of people on this call know something about frameworks. All the frameworks models are in here: ETOM, SIDTAM, and metrics. And what we give you is a way to both explore, so you can drill down using these little drill down arrows, right? So you get all the way down to the whole ETOM model or SID model or TAM model. Anything you select, you're going to get a description, the descriptions for. Everything's in here. It's got your process ID, etc. It tells you kind of where you are in the hierarchy, right? This is a 4. But then what you can do in here is you can assign stakeholders. So let's say, now this might not be so important for a catalyst, but in real life, right, you might want to say who would be responsible for a particular project. So you can assign a stakeholder to this, and then it gets a little head on it when there's a stakeholder assigned. The other thing you can do is assign, using this the little color teardrop again, you can assign color coding to it. Now the color coding means something that you will have defined yourself. So the color coding, I called this phase 1, phase 2, and then which was it, a city responsibility or a parking system provider responsibility? And then you can use these to filter. So I just want to look at what's in phase 1, for example, and it filters. Or I just want to look at what's in phase 1 and is being done by the transportation department. So you've got your filtering here by tagging with colors and tagging with stakeholders. So on a catalyst, maybe you're not going to be executing this. So in real life, where you would need to assign a stakeholder to everything, maybe you don't need to do that. But if it helps you with doing your demo to say who's going to do what in the demo, which party's going to do what, you can definitely use this to have the scoping conversation for your demo, right? Which processes are we bringing to life and who's going to do which pieces of them? So you definitely can use those tools, okay? And same thing with SID and TAM, it works exactly the same way. You've got the same, you've got the model in there. You can drill down. Anything you click on, you'll get definitions, and you can assign stakeholders, and you can also color code, okay? So, and then metrics is a really good one for catalysts, because you want to be measuring what you're changing in your catalyst project. So so while this kind of comes at the end in the demo, right, it actually, I could probably update this to say add metrics in the beginning, right, to think about how do you want to measure success, because that is in your user stories, right? I could even add this in here to say metrics. And then, the way that you can search for or the way that you can define metrics or find metrics is in here. So again, it works exactly the same way. Anything you select, you're going to get a definition for, and you can always assign a stakeholder or write comments or whatever on here, okay? And color coding is just the same. So that is the demo of smart parking, just to show you how that works. Now let me show you a blank project. To do a new project, you add a project. By the way, you can do as many as you need to. If you've got a couple of ideas within your catalyst, you can have multiple projects. That's fine. So I'll just call this new project. You can put a description in here. You can apply it to a market or leave it as a general for all. We've only got one template in here right now. This template applies to the catalyst, so that works. So you say create. Now you see it looks very similar to what I was just showing you, right? There's really not a lot of customization to get going at all. These headings are editable, right? So that's one thing that I did, because I like to use the terms define, design, scope. But you can call this anything you want. You can call it, now phase 1, phase 2. You can call it, business technical. You can call it whatever you want, okay? So it's literally just a click and an edit to change that. The order in here, I go pretty close to the order of how this business scenario template comes up, but depending on the kind of project, you might want to change the order or move something around. It's literally just a drag and drop to bring it up there. If you want to do, maybe value before business drivers, It is literally just drag and drop to change the order. You can also have multiple copies of one area, of one module. So let's say you wanted to split out value between customers and internal. You can always create another module and say, okay, I need two value modules, and this one's going to be internal. Internal parties. And so now, now I've got my two value modules, right? I've got overall value and internal parties, and maybe I want them next to each other. So it's very easy and intuitive to just use this straight as it comes out of the box, okay? And then, this is where your ecosystem designer is. You saw that I had about, I don't know, 7 or 8 ecosystems that I had designed. So again, do as many as you need to. We didn't talk about the use case diagram, but this is, and I'll show you some in some other catalysts, but it's just a very simple, just a little drawing module. This is not going to be your detailed, flows, technical flows. This is just more of getting a perspective of how are the moving parts fitting together now that we know how all the parties are interacting with each other. And I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. And then the context, or sorry, the components, which is the frameworks piece, it's exactly what we just looked at, just without the color coding and without the little heads applied. So you've basically got a blank template. So it comes to you in a way where you can essentially change nothing and get going, right? You start with your stakeholders, go to your roles, work your way through the modules as they come out of the box. And then as you get going, if you feel like you need to add another module or you need to change the order or whatever, it's very simple to do that. Okay, so that is how, it's really not a giant leap, right? To get from what I was showing you in the smart parking demo from this starting place, it's just basically click and start typing, right? Who's the stakeholder? There's going to be service provider, right? And then there's going to be a user, etc., right? So it's just point and click. And so this is a really great exercise for your team to go through together to figure out how, who are all the parties that are involved and what are the business reasons for them to be involved. Okay, so any other questions before I go into showing you some other examples from previous catalysts? Okay. Okay, so you see here that I've got these catalyst samples. I need to find this out. Nancy, I think I see you on the call. I don't know if you're muted or not. Do you happen to know if, or Tanya, or is Kevin on the call, if these catalyst samples can be made available to the other catalyst teams? I know they can be. I don't know if we've done that already, though.
This is Nancy Linus, so I am hopefully off mute.
Yes, you are.
The catalyst samples should be available to the others, to anyone. They should be able to copy those. I don't know if you can grab it and copy it and they can rename it.
Okay, so let's just make sure after this call that the catalyst samples become available. I'm sure Kevin can do the configuration that way for these projects. So, okay, let's just make sure we do that. So let's just say that anything you see here that says catalyst sample, we're going to make sure we share with you so that you can have these examples to refer back to. And what Nancy was saying was that, let's say you saw a project that maybe you could, use some information from. You can always copy a project. So, and this little menu here, so what you will get will be these catalyst samples, but they would be read only. But you can always copy a project and essentially, rename it to what you want it to be, and then you've got that project that you can use as a place to get ideas from and edit, etc. Okay, so it's that easy to just copy a project. Okay, so I'm just going to work my way through these, just starting at the top. This is in no particular order, but just so that you can see, this was joint agile delivery. This was about essentially delivering new services faster using Agile. So it was a lot of internal process stuff. So it's quite an internal project, right? So there Their roles are things like service provider and supplier and system integrator and end user. Their stakeholders are VNF suppliers and customers, product managers, service build team, service test team, QA managers, service assurance, right? So this is very internal stakeholder oriented view. Then they have their problem statements, right? So as a customer, I need to blah, 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 right? As a service build team, as a CSP, as a VNF supplier, right? So they have their short user stories for what they are trying to accomplish for their key stakeholders. They've got their value statements, right? They're concerned about shorter time to market, higher quality with a multi-party shared testing environment, hosted platform approach lowers CapEx, and lower TCO with this approach. So they've filled in their little templates, right? And they've said which stakeholders apply. Then they have got their ecosystem view, right? So they've got their VNF suppliers and their service build team working together. They've got their operations and product management up here at the top working together. They've got their service assurance, connects with a lot of the other stakeholders, and QA connects with a lot of other stakeholders. And then, you know, they use the color coding, right? So you can look at where the money flows side, right? Who's paying what for who, right? Funds are flowing in that direction, or you can look at the data side and turn off financial, etc. Right? They've got an operational view. So, so they really are, you know, you can really get a good idea of what's going on in the project simply by looking at this view. And then they've got their use case diagram. Oh, actually, I think they didn't do anything in there. So sorry. And then they also did some frameworks mapping. So they, you know, they highlighted which areas in the ETOM and the SID and the TAM and the metrics were relevant to the project. Okay. So that's what that project did. Do we have a question? No. Okay. I thought we had another question. By the way, please interrupt me, anybody, if you've got questions or comments.
Hi, Rebecca. It's Kevin here.
Oh, hi, Kevin.
Hey, yeah, I just want to get back to you on that other point. Yeah, any of those Catalyst samples will be available to any of the Catalyst users, so they're shared at a company level to all users.
Automatically, they're shared. We don't have to do anything. Okay,
Yep,
good.
they're automatically
Good.
done.
I thought so, but I just didn't know if we'd push the go button on that.
Yep.
Okay, we have. Thanks, Kevin. So anybody that doesn't know Kevin, that's Kevin McCaffrey. He's our partner in creating Curate FX. They do the development for Curate FX, and then they're supporting the Catalyst teams in using Curate FX as well. Okay, so let's look at another couple of projects. Offer Canvas. This is about dynamically offering products to customer or services to customers. So their stakeholders are customer, service provider, offer manager. You see the long descriptions that they've got in here, right? You could put long descriptions of who your stakeholders are. And they've got some functions that they're calling stakeholders, like configure, price, quote, or self-service portal. So really anything that you need to think through your project, it might be called stakeholder, but you can put anything in here, person, place, or thing, you know, function, etc. Anything that you need to think through your project can go in here. So then they've got their drivers, right? Reduce and improve offer creation cycle. They've got some good, pretty long descriptions in here. They're empowering the office manager and empowering the customer. Okay, so those are their top level drivers. They've got some value statements in here. So, and so they've got competitive marketing, etc. So some are internal, some are external. And then they've got their problem statements or user stories, which again, that you do that by stakeholder, your stakeholders pop up. Oh, I'm in read only, so I can't show you. Then they did a high-level use case diagram just to make sure they had a flow of what was happening in their project. They did their business canvas, and they did their ecosystem. Okay, so this is quite an internal one, right? All of these things are internal things in a CSP, except for the customer, and they've got a few partners related to the application fabric. But you know, it just gives you an idea that you can do quite an internal project by looking at the Joint Agile or the offer canvas. Okay, let me just look at maybe one or two more. Let's see, this one. So this was a platform for IoT and anything as a service. Again, you see the numbers here, right? They have 15 roles and 18 stakeholders. So they've done quite a bit of work on this project where they've got their service provider and they've got some functions here, orchestration and assurance. They've got a systems integrator who's enabling the marketplace. They've got IoT vendors because this is for really making IoT an enabler for any kind of ecosystem type of a service. And they happen to do their example with drones. So they've got drones in here, right? Drone operator. They've even got a little developer ecosystem that they thought through. So they've got a long list of stakeholders. Then they have problem statements. See, they did a little edit here on problem statements to say the objective of this catalyst is, right? So that was just a little text edit that they did to be clear on how they were using this module. So they've got this filled in, right, for this CSP perspective, and is the digital service provider perspective. They've got their drivers, right? They want low entry barriers. They want new business models. They've got technology drivers, and they've got basically a new business model to provide a platform. They've got one overall value statement. They've got the drone user story and the telco user story. And then they did a very complex ecosystem drawing. You see they've got their developer ecosystem over here, and then they've got their platform in the middle and all of the pieces that they need to make their platform go, and then how the platform would be used by the consumer, and how the drone as a service would put itself onto the platform. And then here's the whole drone ecosystem over here. So, you know, so they really, and this is before they could add images or backgrounds and stuff. So it's just that those are new features, adding the background and adding the images and the text elements. So there's none of that in these demos, but you could imagine how you could get really creative with this and put a background behind here that shows that this is the developer ecosystem, and that this is the drone area, and that this is the platform area. That could be an interesting addition to this project. And then let me see, I'm going to show you one more, and then we will go to any more questions. This logical factory one, same, you know, they did a nice job of saying, okay, this is basically, you know, factory as a service. So it's definitely an ecosystem one, and it's all enabled by a CSP. So they've got all their stakeholders in here for the manufacturing. They've got the CSP, they've got suppliers, etc. They've got their drivers, right? Top level drivers. They're boosting efficiency and increasing flexibility. This project, by the way, is one that said they got started, and then when they used Curate FX, it made them realize that they needed to do something different, because when they looked at the drivers and the value statements, they needed to kind of rethink their scenario. So good value in spending time on that. So you see, you know, again, their value statement, savings, it's about money, right? Indirect savings, direct savings, customization. They've got their problem statements again, the little user story format. And then they did quite a complex use case diagram, right, to show how everything flows in their view. They've got their business canvas to look at the business model, you know, what's the costs and the revenues, what channels are they using to market, etc. And then they did a very nice ecosystem diagram as well that shows, you know, here's the application fabric partner, so all of the applications that would be the as a service things, and then here are the factories that are tying in to the platform and using the different applications. So that's just some examples of what Catalysts have done in the past. You know, you want to do what's useful for your project, right? That's the main thing. But we've definitely, like I said, we've definitely gotten feedback that projects that did this are, you know, they're kind of more on the same page, right? So let me give you just some quick logistics about this. So I've said it 20 times and I'll say it the 21st time. Get started now. Investing time up front will help your team, you know, have focus for the duration of your project, right? So if you all get on the same page now, you're all going to know where you're going. Collaborate. So leaders got logins before Action Week for the most part, but really anybody on the team can get a login. The only thing that has to happen is you have to have cleared IPR. So you have to go to the project area and click join project, and then you'll be in the Confluence space. And once you've done that, you can get a CurateFX login for your project. I know some projects are assigning a person to be the CurateFX kind of manager for their team. So, you know, if that person's already done it, great. But really, the more the merrier in terms of, you know, getting input from your team. So however you want to work it on your teams, just get everybody to clear IPR and then let Tanya know who you want to have logins, and she can facilitate that with Kevin. Okay. Create. So as I was saying, you can have multiple copies of any module, you can have multiple projects, you know, really anything you want to do. So this should be create and / creative, right? Be creative with CurateFX. You know, use it to really help your team, you know, kind of have that magic of collaboration where you are working together and coming up with something that's bigger than the sum of the parts. Okay, capture. Really, you can use CurateFX to tell your story from beginning to end, right? If you're going through all of those pieces on that flow that I was showing you, you're going to have a story to tell. And we have heard from our judges who go around and judge the Catalyst Awards that the teams that use CurateFX to tell their stories really are able to tell their stories very clearly and in a good, you know, it's got, you know, the beginning of the business part, it's got kind of the view of how the parties fit together, and it's got, and then you can move on to the demo technology piece of your project. So we have gotten that feedback that the judges really appreciate seeing the stories told through CurateFX. And then, you know, contribute. One of the key things with the Catalyst is that we're doing this so that we can all be moving the industry together faster, right? We can all learn faster through the Catalyst program. And so we need you to contribute back what you do at the end. And a great thing to do is capture what you've done, right? Using your whole team, collaborating, capture everything, put it in CurateFX, and then you can contribute it back to TM Forum. So like I showed you those Catalyst samples, your project can become one of those Catalyst samples, and people will be using them and referring to them as new business ideas, new business models, what happened in previous Catalysts as we go forward. And all you need to do that at the end of your project is team approve your model, and then we can take it from there to make it into a Catalyst sample. So I know that's a few months away, but please have that in mind, that is a really great way to make a contribution at the end of your project. Okay, that was everything I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, etc.? And are you ready to jump in?
Sorry, Rebecca. Karim, I have a question.
Hi, Karim. Hi, Karim.
Hello, Rebecca. Just on this slide, we can see slide number 5. So yes. I'm right to say that thanks to CurateFX, you can go forward on the next parts. But for the capture details, it's not, you don't use CurateFX. It's typically the project, the catalyst you are developing, the capture details part. So what I understand is that thanks to Catalyst, thanks to CurateFX, you define business driver, prem statements, so on, business models, user stories, and so on, the different kind of relationship between partners. Okay, all this, the black, the red.
Yeah.
But the gray one, have you shown the new demo? Thanks to Curate.
Yeah. So right. Okay. So let me explain that. So I could put a line right in here between now and next, and then in here you're developing your demo, right?
It's what I understood. Yeah. Okay. Very clear.
In here. But then you can go back into CurateFX, and you can say, okay, you know, the things that we really looked at in this project. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. The things we really looked at in this project are these processes, right? You can select the processes that are relevant to that project. You can select the SID elements that are relevant to the project. So this is part of the capture, right? Is labeling everything in frameworks that is relevant to your project. Okay, so I could put something in here, you know, I could take a little circle and I could say develop demo or something right here, right?
Okay, it's clear. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. All right. Good question. Anybody else have a question or comment?
Yeah, Rebecca.
Who's excited to get started? Hi, Amir.
Hi. I already, as you were talking, I used my email and registered already and created the project page. I wanted to ask, when getting into stakeholders, do I need to specify the champions and the participants by name, or just keep it on the role level, like CSP champion or a participant? Or
yep. So that it depends, right? You might want to have multiple views. So you might be an ecosystem designer, right? Let me go into one that I can play with for a minute. So in ecosystem designer, you might want to, you know, have a simple one that is just generic, right? It's a CSP or whatever, right?
Right.
And then maybe go into one where instead of having, I had one further down here, instead of having, you could have the logos, right? Of the companies, maybe either on top of it or next to it, right? I put this one on top of it because I said I don't need that little box. I'm just going to have the picture.
Okay. So again, where did you make those edits? Under the stakeholders section?
So anything that you want to have as a stakeholder, you define, you know, to pull them out here onto the diagram, you make them a stakeholder. Right. So stakeholders are pervasive through all of CurateFX, okay? So anything that you want to show up repeatedly in all of your modules, you want to identify them as a stakeholder. If you're just trying to be creative from a presentation view, you can do it just as an image element and, you know, drop a logo in or something, right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, the difference?
Yes, I'm looking on the you know, on the environment that I just started to create. So when I'm getting into stakeholders, I just have a place there, you know, to add the stakeholder name, maybe role and description. I don't see the place where I'm adding the image or logo or something.
Right. So that's later. That's in Ecosystem Designer. In in the stakeholder, the only place you're going to add images is in an Ecosystem Designer module. That's the only place. Okay.
Where do I find it? Yeah, I'm looking on my own environment.
If you keep going, it's sort of a later module in the basic new project view. Here, I can show you.
I'm looking now on yours. Okay.
Okay. So if you say add project, this is right.
Yeah. I've done
got a new project.
Right.
It's under this scenario context area.
Okay.
All right. So I will say, right, you do have to kind of play
with it.
You do. And one thing that you have to get your head wrapped around, right? Your first question was a very perceptive question, which is you have to decide at what level are you going to define your stakeholders. Is it very detailed company, names? Is it functions? Is it a combination? Are you going to do multiple views? So once you start playing, you're going to say, oh, I think I want to do this at a lower level. I'm going to add some more lower level stakeholders.
Gotcha.
And so it won't just be linear, right? You're going to go into problem statements and say, oh, I just thought of another problem that needs to be solved. That means I need to add another stakeholder who would be responsible for that problem.
Right.
And then as you're designing your ecosystem, you're going to say, oh, I'm missing somebody. And you'll go back and add the stakeholder so that they show up as one of your stakeholders.
Right. Now I added people to the project. Like, for example, I added to Rene and gave him read-write privileges.
Okay, good.
So for Gadi, so do I need to do this for my entire Catalyst team, or they are signing in themselves? How it works?
Right. Okay. So there's
exactly here.
This is where you were, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Tanya here.
Go ahead, Tanya.
I don't know if there's something, and I do apologise if I sound really low on my speaker today. There's two things when you use Curate FX. The people that you would like to edit, we would need to create them accounts if they haven't got accounts on Curate FX yet. However, if you just want to share with the team so that they are up to date as where you are in Curate FX and so that they can see the progress, there's actually a share-only link. So instead of having to give everyone edit rights, you can just share the link with your team and they will be able to see
okay, I see it here. Generate link, yeah.
Yeah, that just means it helps you control who's editing it and who's only on viewing mode.
Okay. Got you. Thanks. That's it for me.
The other thing you can do, like you were saying, right? If you I have a lot of people that I can add here, but let's say I wanted to add Tanya to this project.
Right.
I can add Tanya.
Exactly. I just said Gadi, for example.
Right. So I can add, and then you can say what permission they have, right? So I want Tanya only to be able to read.
Right.
Okay.
Give her also to write. She's a good person.
She's good. Okay. All right. Tanya is okay. I'll add her the right privilege. Okay.
I recommend her.
Yeah. So great point, Tanya. And then for anybody that's new to Curate FX, this generate link. If you just want to share the progress of the project, say with your boss who's not in, who is not on the project, you can say generate link, and then essentially it's a link that you could email, right? So if I just paste the link, oh, I didn't copy it. I have to copy it now, and then I can just paste it. And so you can just email that link to your boss, right? This is this new project that we just created, right? Where I just typed a few letters. Okay. So yeah, Tanya, thanks for pointing that out. I forgot about that, sharing that admin information. Okay. Any other questions? I know we're running a little over. Sorry, everybody.
Yep. A question for me. Arnold speaking.
Hi, Arnold.
Hello. Okay, with Curate FX, we create across the Catalyst a kind of a similar language, expressing what we are doing.
Yes.
But it seems to go to a certain level, describing the stakeholders and a bit of what you're planning to do. But can you actually also build a use case? I mean, in general, we're talking about digital processes, so building up a use case related to a process and build that process with data. Is that possible?
You know, Curate FX is not really designed to do the technical flows like that in a use case. There is a module, right? That is a use case diagram module. But it is really just, where you're dragging elements onto the screen and maybe changing the color. And then, you bring another one in, and then you can do lines between them, right? Yeah. So that's really the only capability. So if you want to do a high level view, of how things might flow back and forth, you can use it for that, but it's not an enterprise architecture design tool where you're kind of tracking, you know, the processes and data and flows between, you know, between all of the technical, you know, the software view of the world, right? It's much more of a business and stakeholder view of the world than the software view of the world. But that being said, people have made some pretty complicated flows on this because they wanted to have it all in one place. But what, you know, what I was saying you can also do is you can kind of do a little bit of a cheat thing, right? And because ecosystem designer is basically like a drawing pad, right? So let's say we just add a blank ecosystem designer. But let's say you really want this to be your detailed use case, right? So now we've got an ecosystem designer that's just blank, and then you can import it as an image. Okay, so if you want to have everything in one place, so you can do your detailed use case somewhere else, like in, you know, Visio or in some enterprise architecture tool, and then just save it as an image and import it as an image. Okay, because it's as simple as drag the image, choose the file. I've got some pictures, right? You just select your picture that you want to import, and here it is, right? And then you can, right? And now you've got an image in here. Okay, so it's sort of a cheat, right? But if you wanted to have a really detailed view of something in here, you can drop it into the ecosystem designer and just leave, you know, just ignore all your stakeholders over here, right? Because you're not bringing them in necessarily.
No. Okay, I understand.
Okay. Okay, anybody else have any other questions? All right, then I think we're finished. Please keep in touch. We want to help you with this. You know, get going on the project. You know, if you want ideas or to bounce your initial attempts at using Curate FX off somebody, I can help, Kevin can help, Nancy can help, Tanya can help. Just let us know what you need, okay? And I think that's it for me. Tanya, do you want to add anything else?
No, that was great.
Kevin, do you want to add anything else?
No, nothing from my side. Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, Kevin's going to do this again tomorrow for in Europe morning time, so it'll be for Europe and Asia. So anybody who's in Europe and wants to hear it again or from a different perspective, you can attend tomorrow and listen to Kevin's version of the story. Hopefully, I think they're pretty similar. Anyway. Okay, so thank you very much for coming, everybody. Really, really appreciate your time on this and look forward to seeing how you go forward with Curate FX. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.